As we enter into the fourth week of Lent, we find ourselves once again in the Gospel of John, chapter 3. If you recall last week, chapter 2, Jesus cleansed the temple, claiming that in his very person he was the fulfillment of God's plan, and that he was bringing about the kingdom of God. In this chapter, Nicodemus, one of the Pharisees, comes to Jesus at night. He comes at a time clothed in darkness because he himself in many ways is not understanding who Jesus is. He is seeking greater understanding. And so Jesus helps him to understand that he himself is the light of the world and that he has come to reveal the truth of the Father's love for us all, hearkening back to our baptismal call, the first week of our Lenten journey. In this week's video, you will be invited to do something that Nicodemus eventually will do. It is to bring others to Christ. Now, this took Nicodemus a good deal of time for him to come into this realization, as it does for many of us. But as we grow closer to Christ, as that relationship with Jesus Christ grows and deepens through this small group encounter, through your daily prayer, through your service for others, it will be on your heart to bring others to Jesus. Because as you encounter Jesus more fully by your words and your deeds, you will then want to bring people to Jesus. You will want to introduce them to He who is your best friend, one who is intimate to you, one whose life has touched your life, and you simply want to share that good news with others. So allow Nicodemus to guide you to Jesus. Even in his own fear, he came to the light and came to understand Jesus as the fullness of life. Blessings on your journey is of inviting others to Jesus as well.
Evangelization, great definition that the church gives us. To evangelize does not mean simply to teach a doctrine, but to proclaim Jesus Christ by one's words and actions. That is to make oneself an instrument of his presence and action in the world. I want to break this apart just a little bit for you. Okay? So it's by words and actions. It necessarily involves both. It necessarily involves both. Sometimes people will kind of hide behind St. Francis. Okay? I'm sure most of us are familiar with that saying that's attributed to St. Francis: preach the gospel and when necessary use words. Okay? Some people kind of hide behind that. They say, well, I just live my life, I just live the gospel, and that's really enough. That's really enough for me. I don't have to preach anything. St. Francis is like turning over in his grave when people hide behind that. It's both. Because the way we live our life should prompt people to ask questions. They should see you living the same life that they're living, but in some way everything is different. So that should prompt questions. And we should be eager to seek those people out. We should be eager to find the people to give an explanation for the hope that's within us. And at the same time, if we're studying and we're understanding and we're able to articulate the gospel, it'll be given credibility by the way we live our life. So those two things go together. And I just love the last part of this, which I emphasized here. To make oneself an instrument of his presence and action in the world. It's this beautiful, mystical, sacramental understanding of evangelization, that it can't be reduced just to a mechanical proclamation or anything like that. It's this beautiful, mystical identification with Jesus himself. To be his hands, to be his feet, to be his eyes, to be his lips, that our passions and our desires would be the very same as his, that when people see us, they don't see us. In some mystical way, they see him. That's evangelization. We think of instruments. The best instruments out there are ones that are very ergonomically fit to the artist, right? Jesus is the artist. So we have to become very ergonomically fit to him, that he can use us. But lest we overthink things or overcomplicate things, let's bring it back. One of my favorite ways of understanding evangelization that really hits home for me is simply this. Evangelization is really nothing other than introducing someone to your best friend. When we think about that, we think about the process of introducing people to our best friend. It's not something that we overthink. It's not something that we overcomplicate. Introducing someone to our best friend is not something that we argue people into. We don't psych ourselves out about it. We don't get nervous about it. It should be just as natural, just as simple as that. When we think about introducing someone to our best friend, we're filled with joy when we think of our best friend. A certain sense of eagerness to talk about our best friend. And we see that in other people. It comes up naturally in conversation. We're filled with joy and naturalness at it. And so it should come up naturally, just in the way we live, because our best friend is simply part of our life. Well, at other times, sometimes we have to strategize a little bit. I'm sure we've all had this experience of doing a little bit of strategizing as to how we can orchestrate introducing someone to our best friend, right? How can I get these two people in the same room with each other? How can I introduce them to this person so that, or like, what can we talk about so that I can introduce them to that person? I'm sure we've all had this experience, right? And now, that's not making a project out of someone. When we put thought into it, all it is just simply very, very sincerely putting thought into how to love someone. And evangelization sometimes involves that. Sometimes we have to put thought into how to love someone, how to introduce them to our best friend, who in this case is Jesus. Jesus, who is the good news.
Some questions for discussion. How has Jesus been light in your personal darkness? With family, friends, those you know, who do you personally know who is struggling with darkness? And how might you bring the light of Jesus, the light of his gospel, to them? Pope Francis reminds us that it is the attraction of the joy of the disciple of Jesus Christ that brings others to him. How can you witness this joy to others in what you say? What is your witness story? And then think about over the next few weeks of sharing those stories with one another in your small group. It may take an extra few weeks, but it will be well worthwhile.